All right. I had a question from a South African interested in working in China. The question is, what English ability can we expect from our students in China? After working at a university for one semester, my answer is, from one class, expect your students to have vastly different levels of English ability, from very good with few English mistakes to very bad with many mistakes. And I think it is important for teachers to understand before they come to China why Chinese make certain mistakes in English and what are the common English mistakes. In order to answer this, I consulted the following relevant academic sources on the matter and came up with the following perspective. I think it is important that the foreign English teacher in China understand why Chinese ESL students make errors by first understanding China's culture and language and the role they play in creating English errors. I have heard an ESL teacher in China say that their students were morons because they couldn't understand the teacher's simple English instructions and couldn't speak simple English. I think this is grossly unfair on the teacher's students. I'd like this teacher to try and speak the student's first language, Chinese, and see how stupid they sound to those Chinese speakers. I think it's safe to assume that Chinese ESL speakers speak English as a second language better than foreigners could speak Chinese. There are many important factors in acquisition errors that Chinese students make. These can be categorized into internal and external. It is their interaction that determines how fast English is learned in China and also what mistakes are made and why they are made. Internal factors are those that the learner has control over and brings to class. These include age, personality, intrinsic motivation, experiences, cognition, and native language. In terms of age plays an important role in Chinese ESL acquisition. Compared to Korea, Chinese start learning English much later in life, and it is my opinion that this helps create more errors in China. Why? ESL acquisition is influenced by the age of learner. Evidence shows that there is a best age for ESL acquisition. Children seem to be in the best position to acquire a new language efficiently. According to the critical period hypothesis, second language is best learned between age 2 to puberty, around ages 12 to 15. This is because young learners' brains process language in non-specific, i.e. all parts of the brain. This makes it easier for children to adapt and switch languages without confusion. The ability to learn language is negatively affected by lateralization. This is the process where the brain is reorganized to fix specific functions, here language, to specific parts of the brain. This causes older students to learn slowly because their brain processes language in only specific parts of the brain. This rigid and fixed brain makes switching languages difficult and confusing. As Chinese learn English later, they find that when they switch over from their first language, Chinese, to their second language, English, that it creates confusion. And this confusion creates mistakes. Thus, after age 15, it becomes more difficult to learn new languages and achieve native-like fluency. Although age is important, it is not the end, as motivated older learners can be successful. And I think it's important to stress this to Chinese learners. Studies by Feldson compared errors made by ESL learners over time and found the following 2 points which is relevant to China. First, in terms of spelling errors end over time, while grammatical errors increase as percentage of total errors. This is very evident in China in terms of grammar, as Chinese students will often continue making the same grammatical mistake year after year, while spelling mistakes go down. In terms of error frequency, younger students make 15.3 errors per 100 written words, while older students make 3.7 errors. However, this might reflect older students using word processors and younger students not. Thus, if older students were not allowed to use it, the frequency of errors would likely increase. I think this is very evident in China, as in many universities, first-year students cannot use laptops privately at home. They have to do their work in university computer labs. So I think with second year and third year and fourth year students who are allowed to use their laptops at home, they're more likely to use word processors and spell check, and thus the number of errors decrease. Although there's been a change in the amount of errors made over time, some type of errors do not change over time. Although older students have learned more rules and make fewer errors overall, when they do make errors, they tend to make the same types of errors as beginners do, namely, in terms of China and Asia, subject-verb agreement errors, where errors are as common with intermediate speakers as with beginners. Learners make the same errors because they still think in the same mindset by not fully understanding grammar rules, or that they move forward in their studies too quickly. I think this is very evident in China, with many students moving through university too fast. Now, in terms of personality, the learner's personality influences English acquisition, with Garden and McIntyre suggesting that language anxiety has negative relationships with learning. Language anxiety causes learners to be nervous, doubt their ability, to have low confidence, and have a faster heartbeat. Anxious learners speak less and make slower progress in oral skills, and do worse in tests as well. While more outgoing students will not worry about making mistakes, they'll take risks and they'll get more practice and do well as a result. In studies by Zhang, Chinese ESL learners suffer high levels of ESL anxiety that increases over time, with sophomores more anxious than freshmen. Also, he found out that anxiety impacts grades with Asian students. I think this is very evident with Chinese students, as they feel a lot of pressure in the classes and thus make a lot of mistakes. It is found that learner anxiety comes from three sources. The first source is the learner's concept of their ability and comparing it to others. The second source is the fear of failure, shame, bad grades, and negatively evaluation in public. This is particularly evident with Asian ESL students and also evident in China, where people are afraid to make mistakes. And thus, if they're afraid, they're more likely not to want to speak in class. Where studies by Bachman found that Asian students in America have the lowest confidence despite having the highest GPAs, Kai et al. Though suggest that this may not be a lack of confidence in their ability, but simply down to the Asian cultural norm of modesty that gives the appearance of a lack of confidence to non-Asian observers. So I would suggest that to our teachers teaching in Asia, it may look like your students have no confidence in English, but actually they do. They're just more modest and less likely to speak in front of their class. The third source is the foreign teacher. To Chinese ESL learners, a foreign teacher is like an alien from another planet, a creature that can't speak Chinese and has a very different culture and manner, until learners get to know them better. So I think it's very important for teachers in China to make the students feel at home and more comfortable with the teachers so that they can learn. In terms of internal motivation, internal or intrinsic motivation has been found to correlate with educational achievement. Learners who enjoy ESL do better than those who don't. When an adult learns ESL, it has been found that there's always a key reason behind it. According to Mahadi and Jafari, these reasons can be divided into two types of motivation. Integrative, to participate in English culture, i.e. those students or learners who want to learn English to travel, or to social integration, i.e. move and live in another country. Instrumental, to use English as a tool to achieve occupational, i.e. a job, academic, i.e. study, and other goals. Now, thus, a Chinese ESL student who needs to learn English to study at a foreign university or go to a conference is more likely to make greater effort to learn and succeed in English. It is important, therefore, that Chinese ESL students know from their teacher why they are learning English, as many students say that they study it because they were told they have to. I've heard this again and again and again. Asians have often asked me why English is such an important second language. My answer is, there is nothing special about English. English is important simply because of what you can do with it. It is useful because it is a lingua franca, the international language of trade, academia, diplomacy, and administration used by people who do not share the same first language. This is important because it has been found that the number of Chinese students studying overseas has increased a lot over time, with 328,000 Chinese studying in English in the US in 2017 alone. It has also been found that learners who have experienced another language or culture are in a stronger position to develop a new language than those who haven't, i.e. those who have traveled will do better likely than those who haven't traveled. Why? Because such learners have a stronger base for learning English, as they have already lived in the box, while those who haven't traveled are still in the box. In terms of cognition, in general, it seems that some learners, some Chinese students, have stronger language abilities than others and naturally make faster progress and learn English better than other students. Such students must be found so that their gift can be developed. So teachers, look out for them. Native language. Perhaps the biggest cause of errors in ESL acquisition is the learner's native or first language, the language that the ESL learner thinks in and processes their thoughts in. Native language impacts ESL acquisition in two key ways. First, the degree of difference between ESL learners' first language, Chinese, and English. Second, the learner transferring Chinese onto English. In terms of language difference, the greater the difference of the ESL learner's first language and English, the harder it is to learn. In this regard, Chinese ESL learners have it bad, as Chinese, a Sino-Tibetan language, and English, a Germanic language, come from a different language family. If Chinese learners were learning, say, Lolo-Burmese, the same language group as Chinese, then it would be a much easier task. ESL learners from the same language group as English, example Dutch, German and Swedish, have a much easier time as their languages are similar. This is evident in the following. Seven of the top 10 ESL countries come from Germanic countries, namely the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Luxembourg, Austria and Germany, or border Germanic countries, namely Finland and Poland. The exception is Singapore, a majority Chinese-speaking country. Thus, Singapore's success should be studied closely by China's education department. It is therefore important that Chinese ESL learners are aware of this language difference, so to not become discouraged. Language transfer errors occur when Chinese ESL learners use Chinese elements when speaking and writing English. The most common Chinese ESL language transfer errors include pronunciation and grammar errors. In terms of pronunciation errors, these include errors caused when English sounds that don't exist in Chinese and when Chinese phonetic base is used instead of English's alphabetic base. These include the following 7 common pronunciation errors that your Chinese student is most likely to make. 1. Word endings. In Chinese, syllables or words generally don't end with consonants, and so learners stress the final consonants, d, b, d, s, g, or add an extra syllable. Examples being gooder, glober, don'ter, yeser, and frigger. 2. Th. th does not exist in Chinese, and so learners replace th with s, with an example being shank you. 3. E. In English, vowel length changes the meaning of the word, but not in Chinese. As a result, the learner changes the short E sound to a long E sound. Thus, fish becomes fish, bin, bean, and delicious, delicious. 4. R and L. As with the, R doesn't exist in most Chinese dialects, so learners find it difficult to hear the difference and often replaces R with L or deletes one of them. Examples being rake into lake, rice into lice, world into willed, and pearl into pearl. 5. The also doesn't exist in Chinese, so learners replace it with w or b. So vest becomes west, drive becomes dribe. 6. Ed ending. The learner doesn't know that there are two ways to pronounce ed. T as in webbed, walked, and ud as in battered, graded. The solution to tell your students is to look at word endings before ed is added. If the word does end in d or t, then it is ud. If the word doesn't end in d or t, then it is d or t. In terms of grammar, the difference between Chinese and English grammar causes learner difficulty and errors. There are 10 main grammar errors made by Chinese students. 1. Articles, missing or wrong choice. Chinese doesn't have English articles, the, an. Chinese speakers will tell you that they have je, this, but this is a pronoun. This results in learners missing or misusing articles, i.e. the. For example, he is student and I want a apple. 2. Prepositions missing. As there isn't a clear difference between prepositions in Chinese, this results in missing or the wrong choice of preposition. For example, Jane and Troy went by car and we will go in foot. Or, we meet in 9:45. 3. Singular plural. Chinese doesn't have separate singular and plural forms for nouns, as context is used to make the difference. Thus, learners often choose the wrong singular or plural words, such as, we have 4 cat. Mark bought 5 book. There are 2 kind of rabbits. In this example, the student knows how to use the correct form when talking about all rabbits in general, rabbits, but fails to do so when talking about a specific kind of rabbit. 4. Countable, uncountable. Wrong choice. Chinese doesn't distinguish countable or uncountable as in English. Instead, it has a unit of measure. So, learners choose the wrong countable or uncountable noun. Example being, Kate gave me some advices for my exam. I have a lot of furnitures in my old house. Do you want a milk? 5. Verb conjugation. Verb conjugation doesn't exist in Chinese. In English, we say, I like chocolate, he likes chocolate, and they like chocolate. As there aren't 2 forms for like and likes in Chinese, learners will say, she like chocolate. 6. Tense. In Chinese, context is used to determine present, past, and future, and not verb conjugation. The problem is that English has many tenses, while Chinese can use one word, example run, in all tenses. For example, present, I run. Past, 2 weeks ago, I run. and future, tomorrow I run. Thus, learners use wrong tense. For example, your student might say, yesterday I sing. 7. Word order, object. Although Chinese ESL learners are lucky that Chinese and English both share a basic subject-verb-object word order, in Chinese a sentence can start with the object if it deals with an old topic. This causes incorrect ESL sentences such as, books I like to read, as English seldom starts a sentence with the object. 8. Gender pronouns. This is a very big problem for Chinese. As Chinese doesn't have gender pronouns he, she, it, the learners forget to use the right gender pronoun, often to do with male, leading to, where is Amy? I can't find him. You will see this error in your class again and again and again, so quickly correct it from the beginning. 9. Negative sentence structure. Negation is expressed differently in Chinese. Whereas in English you will say none of them are wearing bracelets. Chinese negation causes learners to say all of them don't wear bracelets. 10. Apostrophe. Wrong apostrophe use is a big problem in China, caused by apostrophes not being clearly articulated in speak-in focused classes. As a result, learners don't know when to use them when writing or speaking. So Chinese should be made aware by the teacher of the apostrophe use. Moving on to external factors. External factors are those that learners have no control over. They include curriculum, teachers, extrinsic motivation, culture and status, cognition, and native speakers. In terms of curriculum, it is important that ESL learners' educational experience is appropriate for their needs. ESL learning is less likely to happen in China if students are fully submerged into their mainstream programs. Non-English majors, for example engineering, don't try hard at ESL, as they don't think English is important to their current social, academic or career needs in China. This is a problem for my university as it is a technical orientated university. Thus, students must understand from their teacher why English is important and relevant to their future needs in terms of social, travel, academic, study and career job. It should also be stressed to your students that additional languages equate to higher pay, as is evident in German, French and Spanish second language speakers earning between 50,000 to 125,000 euro more over the next 40 years than those who do not speak a second language. Additional languages can also help you get a job. For example, those 350,000 Chinese students studying in the US gain an ESL skill that will help them secure a job in China instead of those Chinese who can't speak English and stayed in China. Your students should know that. In terms of teachers, some ESL teachers are better than others at providing effective learning experiences for their students. These students will make faster progress with a good teacher and slower with a bad teacher. Teachers should learn how and when to correct errors in China, as constant correction discourages Chinese students. Instead, they should focus on highlighting common errors. External motivation. External or extrinsic motivation comes from two main external sources. In terms of teachers, learners given encouragement to learn by teachers generally do better than those who aren't, so teachers encourage them. In terms of parents, Chinese learners of parents who do not value English in China are less likely to acquire English as quickly as students in China whose parents do value English. Culture and status. There's evidence that the lower or higher the status of English in a foreign country, high for here, China, the slower or faster learner will acquire it. It is also evident that tolerance to foreign cultures also impacts learners' motivation to learn in English. So if you're in China and you have a student who cannot tolerate a foreigner, that student is most likely to not do well in English because they simply don't care for the person or the language. Access to native speakers. Learners who don't have access to native speakers, i.e. a foreign teacher, are likely to acquire English slower than those who do, particularly in oral English. Foreign teachers are important because they serve as linguistic models to copy and give feedback. And I think it's important for foreign teachers to understand the role that they play in China and not take it as an easy job to slack and do nothing. You're here to earn money. At least be professional. The personality of the teacher is also critical to aid ESL learning. A foreign teacher who makes the learner feel comfortable speaking thus speeds up English acquisition. Foreign teachers should also be aware of the learner's culture and first language should better understand and identify the errors and challenges faced by learners. Teachers who can speak Chinese are the most important asset to Chinese because they can understand and say certain things that can be understandable to the students versus a teacher who can't speak Chinese. In terms of slang, worth his weight in gold. Do you know what that means? Most Chinese don't. That brings me also to metaphors, which, along with slang and idioms, are important to native English speakers, but are undertaught in Asian universities and in Asian classes. Thus, it should be stressed in China the role that idioms, metaphors, slang play, and that teachers mustn't overlook them, because if you do, and your students listen or travel to foreign countries that speak English, they won't understand a lot of what's being said. Dialects. Finally, there is more than one kind of English. And I wish Chinese students and Asian students would understand this. Although Asians generally learn American English, Chinese tourists, businessmen and students are increasingly going to Europe, Africa and Australia where they encounter other English dialects. It is therefore important that universities and schools hire teachers from America, England and Australia to help learners become acquainted with their differences. Namely, American and British English have different ways of pronouncing words, namely A, T, Y, R, and stress. And every single Chinese student should know this. Also, in addition to this, many American and British English words have differences in terms of spelling. Again, this is going to shock Asian students if they don't know this. And in conclusion, these are some of the reasons why Chinese students make mistakes and what are the common errors. So please take note of this, teachers. Better understand these reasons so that when you go to China you can spot these errors and correct them. I hope this was of some help. I hope it wasn't too boring.